I told this story before in a video called NASA Engineer Claims Demons Attacked Him, the Bill Vaile Story. After making this video, Bill personally reached out to me and thanked me for sharing his story, but there was some information that needed to be corrected. And after lots of back and forth chatting with one another, I can say with great honor that Bill has chosen me to help clear the air and get the most accurate retelling of his harrowing story out to the world. Bill did want to include his reasons for sharing his story in the first place: to expose Satan, to offer hope that there is a way out, and to pass on the lessons learned from this, what worked and what did not work. With that being said, he was also generous enough to provide a signed copy of his amazing book, which was the source material for the original video, as well as this now more accurate retelling. So please, stay tuned till the end of this video for that giveaway opportunity. Now, let's begin telling this absolutely incredible tale. After a chance encounter with a strange ritual, Bill would find himself plagued by a merciless evil, one that threatened to ruin his very existence. Yet he was just as haunted by a burning desire to know the truth about what was tormenting him. First things first, in the original video I referenced that Bill was a NASA scientist. However, this isn't totally true. He was, however, an operations quality manager for a NASA subcontractor. So although there was misinformation repeated over many mediums, this is what he truly did. So there was a connection, but he did not directly work for NASA. The claim that he worked for NASA was erroneously added to the television show that Bill did, and he's tried to get the truth out since. Bill would find his life taking a sudden turn when he and his wife finalized their divorce in 2002. Feeling burnt out and needing a fresh start in life, he quit his job in the aerospace industry and moved to his hometown of Arlington, Texas, to be with his younger brother, Bob, and reconnect after many years. Being burned out from high-stress jobs, Bill searched around for anything different to do with his life and his time. Before long, he accepted a job at a water purification company, and his brother Bob joined him later, so they had the opportunity to work together. During this time, he looked around for a house and found one well within his budget that was a good fit for him, and the deal was made. In fact, the deal was so good that it seemed almost too good to be true. Early during Bill's employment at his new job, his employer had received a call from a client asking for someone to be at her house at exactly 5 p.m., not a minute before or a minute after. Wanting to prove his competence to his fellow co-workers, Bill accepted the job. He kept a keen eye on his watch as he drove through the suburban streets of Arlington to make sure that he would arrive right on schedule as promised. When he reached his destination outside an ordinary-looking home, the first noises he heard were the muffled screams of a woman from inside the house. Raising an eyebrow and feeling that something wasn't quite right, and hoping that they would just cancel the appointment altogether, he walked to the front door and knocked at exactly 5 p.m. At first, there didn't appear to be any interruption in the woman's yelling. He couldn't make out much of what she was saying till he heard unmistakably, "In the name of Christ, I command you to leave these men." After ringing the doorbell several times with no response, and knowing that the woman was just on the other side of the door, continuing her orders. He knocked. Then the door opened, and a strange woman stood in the small crack that had been created. She stared at him with a blank expression, as though looking through him. Behind her, he could make out the figures of 3 men on their knees in a darkened room. At that, Bill bolted to his company van as fast as his legs could carry him. He called his employer and told them that he would never take a call from that client again. Although the interaction was strange, Bill simply thought at the time that these 3 young men had done something terribly wrong, and that this was the woman's way of punishing them. Later that night, Bill's heavy bed shook violently for what seemed like several seconds, almost to the point of knocking him off of it. All he could do was be tossed back and forth and hold on as best as he could. Still in awe of what had just happened, Bill set about attempting to see just what had happened and what had caused this. Although wide awake and knowing what had happened was real, he somehow convinced himself that he must have simply been dreaming, so he laid back down and slowly drifted back off into dreamland. The following morning, nothing else in his house appeared to have been shaken by the quake. The clocks in his room read 3 a.m., and he wasn't terribly convinced that it was in fact an earthquake that had caused the disturbance in the first place. Later that day, he would search to see if an earthquake had in fact been recorded the previous night, but no such quake had happened. After this incident, dove birds would begin gathering in the trees outside of his home. So much so that the realtor who sold him the house was baffled. Quoting Bill here, "I was on the phone with the real estate agent when the trees in my yard became full of doves. There were hundreds of them, and they were so loud that I could not hear the conversation. I had to call the agent back later. This was within a day or so of me moving in, and then it never happened again." Strange, no doubt, but only the mere beginning of many strange things to come. Bill started to notice the pervasive and almost smothering smell of bacon in his home, as if someone were constantly cooking an entire package on his stove. Other odors began filling his home at random times as well, from the pervasive scent of ozone to perfume, then more intense odors like those of sulfur and feces. The atmosphere from here would grow ever darker. Each time Bill seemed to cross the threshold into his home day after day, the feeling of his house grew more heavy and foreboding, with a strong feeling of doom and evil. Mysterious areas of cold temperatures in the house became normal, and although Bill would try his best to find an explanation that it was caused by the AC or poor insulation or a draft. Obviously, being a smart guy, I'm glad Bill took so many steps to debunk things. But some manifestations are just not explainable, as we'll continue to see. At night, he'd experience things that would only get darker and more sinister. He would wake in the early morning hours to the sensation of a small creature, like that of a cat or a dog, running across his feet. But his dogs were kenneled at night. They would also growl and even bark at seemingly nothing in different areas of the house. I did also want to note that I had previously mentioned the various smells that would invade Bill's home, one of them being that of fecal matter. This did not occur because of any animals that Bill owned. The activity would continue, however, would be so slight as to be easily ignored, or even if it couldn't be ignored, Bill would simply accept that even if he did not know of a logical explanation, it was out there somewhere. The watershed moment for Bill came when he sat down to watch TV one evening. Suddenly, He watched as a water bottle that had been sitting on his kitchen counter from the night before flew across the room and bounced off the wall next to his head. It was at this point that Bill, in all of his logic and intelligence and experience, had to finally admit that he was dealing with something that fell under the realm of the paranormal, for he had no other explanation, no other reasoning that would make sense of the months of unseen forces toying with him. At this final acceptance that this was in fact something supernatural, the phenomena began to kick into a much higher gear, and the phenomena deepened beyond just sights and affected Bill's surroundings. Bill began to hear, as he describes, evil hissing sounds, and these would wake him up and would be accompanied by awful scratches on various parts of his body. Bizarrely, all white-colored things within his home began to be turned black. Black stains would appear on the carpets and walls for no apparent reason and with no discernible cause. As Bill would tell me, it took a lot of effort to scrub these dark spots, and I never did truly know why they showed up or what the purpose or message they were supposed to convey, other than just trying to unsettle me. Electronic technicians frequented his house, often due to the constant flickering of lights, failure of his computer, and television, and many of them stated that they had never seen anything like it in all of their experiences. His phone would call random people in the middle of the night while he slept, always around 3 a.m. in the morning. Bill called his phone company to attempt to find a solution to the problem, and during his phone call with the representative, a strange, aggressive voice could be heard, speaking in a language that neither of them could understand. The representative confirmed that they heard it as well and were baffled, as they used a secure line that a third party wouldn't be able to hijack. One night, while calling his friend Michael, who happened to be a sound engineer, the same voice appeared on the phone line. Bill told Michael to hang up and that the voice was evil. Michael had already turned on his recording equipment, which he used to record plenty of podcasts and other auditory material. However, upon reviewing the tape recording, he could only hear Bill speaking on the other end of the line, for which he had no explanation. I've heard of this happening in other cases as well, that demonic forces often manipulate things to unnerve a person and manifest themselves, for example, over the phone. In another video, I told the story of the case of a woman named Julia and psychologist Dr. Richard Gallagher, where the line was secure, and yet low, evil voices invaded the calls between Gallagher and the priest who was involved at that time. Bill, needing more confirmation that other people were seeing what he was seeing, that he wasn't losing his mind, decided to invite his brother over and asked him to stand in his closet with the lights off. Bob stood in his brother's closet with the door closed. He would emerge a little later, disgruntled, and Bill had asked if he had seen anything, and he replied, "I think your closet needs to be cleaned out." Bob would later reveal that during his time in the closet, 2 large boxes had fallen behind him, and the cord for the overhead light had whipped him in the face, as if it was grabbed by an unseen hand. It spooked him enough that he didn't wish to talk about it further. Bill and Bob loved to golf, as it was one of the few times that they would get to come together and unwind and catch up on what was going on in each other's lives. One day, the trunk to Bob's car slammed shut while they were attempting to retrieve their golf clubs. They were unable to recreate the same occurrence on their own, as the trunk required some effort to close, and there was no wind to speak of on that day. At one point, when Bob was at Bill's house in his den, sitting at his bar, while writing down information for appointments, he began to hear something rustling around in the trash can out of his sight. He ignored it for a time, but soon thought that possibly Bill's dogs were getting into the trash, so he stood up and walked over to inspect it. However, not only was the trash can untouched, but he also had to pass the dogs, who were still in their kennels, in order to inspect it. On another occasion, he briefly used Bill's house as a pit stop on the way to an appointment, and after using the restroom, Bob noticed that the sway light hanging from the ceiling was moving back and forth quite erratically. He assumed it must have been an AC unit making it move. It was only later, when asking Bill about it, that he learned that in fact, there was no AC unit anywhere near that light. When Bob and his wife were at Bill's house for dinner, Bill watched the television and saw something move out of the corner of his eyes. He stood up immediately, wanting to make sure that he wasn't the only one seeing whatever this thing was. He quickly had Bob sit down and watch the TV to see if he noticed anything out of the corner of his eyes as well. Soon, a look of shock came over Bob's face as he saw something move in and out of his closet. When Bob's wife sat down, she gasped after a moment as well. And then all three began to sketch what they had seen, and all of them drew the same thing: small, 2 to 3 foot tall beings that looked like imps. For those unaware, imps are demons from European folklore and myth that are depicted as small, mischievous, and goblin-like, and were the familiar spirits of witches or even the devil's personal attendants. After this, Bill told them everything he had been experiencing, and Bob offered to let him stay over to get away from it all, everything that was tormenting him. But he declined. His reasoning was that he felt that if he left, it would be like running away and letting whatever was attacking him win the battle. Following this, his bedroom became a constant source of torment, as the bed would shake sometimes violently, and other times only just enough to keep him awake. Small hands would depress his mattress and hit him from underneath. He would feel invisible beings slide into bed next to him, and often heard loud knocks, bangs, and scratches from inside the walls. He would receive scratches and bruises without explanation. He then began to see the apparition of a ghost cat and strange cold mists in his house. The home at this point was a place full of an abyssal, foreboding presence. Bill desperately wanted all of this to stop, to reclaim his home and his life. He began to research the occult, the paranormal, and anything and everything online and in literature that could give him a better understanding of what he was dealing with and possibly how to remedy it. I can relate heavily with this, although I'm very fortunate that my main experiences, as I told them in the Willow Street Nightmare and the Cedric Horror, also known as my personal experiences, took place when I was a child. It has led me down the path of a lifelong fascination with the paranormal and the demonic. I think for me anyways, and perhaps Bill as well, that it's part of not only trying to find a solution in the active situation, but to later cope with just what we had experienced. The activity was also starting to take a toll on Bill's health. He found himself sick often and taking trips to the hospital much more than he used to. Part of these new ailments included the searing and horrendous pain of cluster headaches, As Bill would tell me in our conversations, watch a YouTube video on them to get an idea of just how bad they are. They call them unaliving headaches because they are so severe that people have unalived to end the pain. Cody, I would have tried anything to resolve them at that time. It is said that cluster headaches are the worst pain a person can have. And trust me, they are correct. In continued efforts to defeat the evil forces he now was battling day in and day out, Bill decided to call paranormal investigators, teams of people who brought state-of-the-art equipment to answer the question of if the supernatural existed and if there is life after death. He went through many teams, none of which seemed to be very scientific, according to Bill. That is until he found the team known as Did You See That, or DYST, which to Bill had the right kind of logical and rational mindset to properly investigate the beings that infested his life. He found their number and dialed it right away. From here, Bill's life would only continue to go down a rabbit hole he never would have found himself going down otherwise. It was a Saturday night when Bill heard a knock at his door. For some time now, he had been inviting groups of strangers into his home to investigate the happenings in his house. He had seen many come and go, usually only for a night, and none of them had truly been able to help. When he opened the door this time, there was only one man standing there to greet him, and his name was Brian Hall, the founder of DYST, a paranormal team that claimed that they did not search for ghosts, they searched for answers. Brian founded DYST in 2005 with his friends in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. They performed investigations and posted their findings on MySpace and began to receive emails and calls from people wanting their aid and expertise in the paranormal. Part of the group's procedure was to begin with a single member of the team giving an assessment of the location before bringing in the rest of the team or any equipment. Brian quickly noted the oppressive atmosphere in the house, and once he had made his rounds, he gave the okay for the rest of his team to begin the second phase. The team was full of various experts in their fields, with a critical eye for anything that could possibly cause noises or strange phenomena in an ordinary house. They searched the house from top to bottom, and once they were satisfied that they had identified any possible areas of false evidence, they went outside and returned with their equipment. They set up a command post in the living room with cameras and audio recorders throughout the house, trying to pick up anything that could be lurking within its depths. That night, however, was relatively uneventful. As we also know from studying many cases here on the channel, these things, the paranormal, can't always be invoked or replicated to study because of the pure sporadic nature of it all. After the team had departed with little to go on, Bill called his mother to tell her how the investigation went. During the call, Bill heard 3 distinct knocks, as if the house was declaring its own malevolent victory. Unlike the previous investigators, DYST would eventually return over the course of the next several months to continually probe the home for its dark and sinister secrets. A variety of activity began to reveal itself to the members of the research team. Shadow people, imps, and even the disembodied apparition of a ghost-like cat were experienced by the crew, just as Bill had been experiencing. On one occasion, the team brought in lasers for a particular experiment. The tech was designed to cast a laser grid in the darkened room. This technique is intended to detect even the slightest movement that might be invisible to the naked eye. The first night came and went with nothing of note. The second was much like the first. But on the third night, where the crew used this laser grid, Bill, Brian, and the team sat in the command center, and they all heard a loud crash from Bill's bedroom. Upon inspecting the bedroom, they found the laser device on the floor. The device had been thrown by a powerful and unseen force. It had been flung so hard that it had struck the bed, bounced off, and collided with the dresser where it had been fastened before hitting the floor. They first checked the cameras, only to find their batteries drained of all power. This was a common occurrence during their investigations at the house, and it was a pervasive obstacle to finding any visual evidence. The team noted times when they could audibly hear the moment when their cameras were switched off by something that they couldn't see. Luckily, they found that the audio recording devices were still functioning when the phenomena occurred. When they played back the audio, they not only heard the loud crash, but something else entirely. They heard a disembodied voice say, "He's coming. Put it back on," just before the laser crashed to the floor. Bill was amazing enough to not only provide all the footage I've used for the lasers, but the actual EVP as well, which I'll play for you now. Despite the lack of visual evidence, Brian was determined to catch the phenomena on video. The next time they arrived at the house, they brought even more cameras and laser grids. They set up the equipment as before and let the newest teammate, Sean, lay in the bed in the master bedroom and asked, "If you're here, can you give me a sign?" Within an instant, the laser moved with a violent force, causing Sean to cry out in surprise. The rest of the team rushed into the bedroom to gather the equipment and to assess the evidence. All but one camera had been completely drained of power. This device had been pointing directly at the laser. The footage caught not only the laser being shoved, but a strange mist that formed around the laser, turning into a violent and aggressive vortex before the activity occurred, then finally dissipating after its conclusion. During another investigation, Bill and his brother Bob and his wife Cindy attended. In addition, Bill invited his friend Chuck and his wife Melissa. Chuck Kelly had been longtime friends with Bill through golfing. To call him a skeptic of the paranormal would be an understatement. His wife Melissa, however, was a woman who not only believed in the paranormal, but was sensitive to it in a way that allowed her to see beings that would otherwise be invisible to the naked eye. For a long time, she had refused to ever go near Bill's home. Eventually, Chuck confronted her as to why. She said, "There is something in that house that's intelligent and evil. Something that knows that I know, and I'm afraid of what will happen if I go there." There is seldomly experiences that terrify me personally these days. With having studied so many cases and having had a good amount of my own experiences, but the feeling that there is not only something evil, truly evil, within a place, but that it's intelligent and that it seeks to intimidate or hurt you. Now, when you feel that, you feel it in your core. your very soul, your being. And this is something that will make you truly experience the feeling that we know as fear. As Bill reached out to Chuck, Chuck told his wife that she needed to speak with him because he needed her help. When she met with Bill, he revealed everything that had been happening, and despite knowing the danger of the entity in his home, Melissa was moved by Bill's plight and agreed to attend the next investigation with Chuck. The day of, she felt apprehension. She sensed that the entity was furious at her coming and wanted to harm her. Her mind's eye saw a beast, like that of an ape, throwing itself against the walls and windows of the house, daring her to come inside. So with a deep breath, she did. Upon entering and being greeted by Bill, she saw several small and hideous creatures gathered at his feet. When they stood on two legs, they looked like hunched-over little men. And when on all fours, they looked similar to cats, but with the hind legs that were thick, like those of a kangaroo. Seeing that no one else noticed these beings, she ignored them as best as she could as she continued her journey throughout the home. When she got to Bill's bedroom, she saw that the imps were at their most comfortable in his room and played across the furniture and the floor. Halfway into the room, she froze. She searched every corner of the room wide-eyed, with her hair standing on end. She sensed something horrible and smart lurking out of her sight in a corner of the room or in the closet. She didn't want to know what it was. She left the bedroom and refused to ever set foot in it again. When the DYST team arrived, they sat in the living room to wait while the team set up their equipment. Then she observed as the small creatures gathered around her in a group of 6. They were curious, like wild animals, sniffing her and testing their boundaries while not letting her get too close. She believed they were trapped by the dark entity who used them for more mischievous activities, such as tormenting Bill in his bedroom, noises, and subtle happenings. Chiming in once again here, I've come across many cases where this seems to be the case. Not necessarily the trapping of demons by other demons for the stronger one's deeds, but rather a dark spirit or demon holding other spirits captive to invigorate or empower themselves. I just find it interesting that this is yet another case that we can add to that list. While pondering this, she heard a commotion from the bedroom where the team was setting up. She saw a large black shape leap from that direction and onto the chandelier, causing it to nearly swing and collide with the ceiling. It jumped down into a corner to hide from the investigative team, before lunging onto the chandelier again and then bouncing into the opposite hallway. The large black shape took up the entire hallway entrance before it disappeared. Unsure of how to process what she had witnessed, she collapsed into her chair. The DYST team convinced her husband Chuck to sit in the closet in Bill's bedroom. He had utter confidence that nothing would happen. The lights were turned off, and Chuck just sat and waited. After several minutes, he became impatient and spoke loudly at whatever they told him was supposed to be there, attempting to provoke whatever it was. For a few minutes, nothing changed. But eventually, Chuck felt the atmosphere change, become heavy and oppressive. He heard hangers begin to clink together around him. The team saw Chuck emerge with wide eyes and a face as white as a ghost. And all he could say was there's something in that closet. Neither he nor Melissa stayed long after this occurred. Brian Hall, after thorough investigations, enlisted the help of any experts he could to try and help Bill. Reiki masters, Wiccans, Buddhists, occultists, anyone and everyone who could attempt to drive out these entities. But sadly, none of them worked. Bill became used to the look of defeat upon the faces of the people who had earnestly tried to help him, but ultimately accomplished nothing. Eventually, when Brian reached the end of his ideas, he sent a single email to Bill. It was straightforward and to the point. You need a priest. Throughout the trials that Bill was forced to face, he found himself struggling with borderline PTSD. He was constantly in a state of hypervigilance, looking over his shoulder and watching his peripheral vision for even the slightest sign of something supernatural. He was dealing with an opponent that he couldn't see, but one which could see him and even attack him at a moment's notice. The suspense kept him from sleeping, and he met each evening with dread. He could no longer distinguish his nightmares from reality. He had a habit of laying down and closing his eyes for a few seconds, and opening them up again to search for anything that had gone amiss. The fatigue would take its toll, and he would often nap in the daytime to offset the sheer exhaustion that he was experiencing on a daily basis. The months turned to years, and the activity inflicted a cost upon Bill's health. He had 2 bouts of pneumonia, 2 heart attacks requiring stents, and would continue to suffer from cluster headaches, which Bill had never had prior. He only wanted the constant torment to end, yet he hid his turmoil quite well and became good at pretending that things were better than they really were, putting up a front of normalcy despite the reality of his situation. I feel like this is the only way that someone could continue to live through something this bad. It also affected those who visited Bill's home to the point that few stopped by, effectively isolating him. These entities, their goals are often to get you isolated and by yourself so they can continue to torment you and feed upon your fear and negative emotions. At night, he would hear loud crashes inches away from his head. He'd awaken to find scratches all over his body, and always in threes. He'd get touched while laying in his bed, and hit, shoved, and would even feel the sensation as if he was being electrocuted. He looked around his room one night, wondering what was in the room with him, as he always did, when suddenly the covers were torn off of his body. He sat up in bed and saw a large black shape at the footboard looming over him. It stood 6 feet tall, with the body of a man. The man was wearing a trench coat and a fedora, all dark as the abyss. When Bill noticed it, it moved towards him, or rather, it floated. He felt an experience that went far beyond mere fear or dread. He described it as the sensation of pure evil. The shadow would travel the length of the bed, getting within 2 feet of Bill's face, and then would vanish. During the investigations, they had taped a dark mass in the very location this entity had disappeared. It dropped from the ceiling, making an audible thud on the floor. It would then dart rapidly across the room, rising above the bedroom window, and ultimately dissipating. Bill was so disturbed by this new threat that he did not and could not speak about it, even to friends. However, Bill was not the only person this entity he referred to as the Hat Man revealed itself to. A friend of Bill's, a woman named Devon, claimed to have seen this entity and believed it was friendly, and as a result, was not afraid of it. After apologizing for not warning her and showing Devin of the other examples of this same Hatman entity appearing to others on the internet, he cautioned her that if she sees it again, to not communicate with it. It is not a friend. And unfortunately, Devin would not take his advice. Hatman would continue to appear to Devin, and at one point, Devin described it appearing in Bill's closet with glowing red eyes, uttering in a deep, growling voice that felt like it was scratching the interior of her skull. Kill Bill. My God, what a terrifying description. A voice so low and grating that it felt as if it was scratching the interior of a person's skull. Devin began to change after this event. She transitioned from frightened to angry, and finally to violent frenzy. Bill would often come home to find his house torn apart. He would later learn that the Hatman had appeared many more times to Devin. It wasn't until Devin threatened Bill with a large kitchen knife in her hand that he began to see just how serious the situation had become. On one evening, after Devin had a tantrum of throwing and breaking things, Devin insisted to Bill, "He's here, and he wants you dead." Bill replied with, "It cannot kill me," trying to keep calm. Devin responded with, "Turn out the lights, you'll see," with a malevolent grin on her face. Bill was unsure whether he had lost his fear, no longer cared, or simply wanted to shake Devin out of the throes of this evil. Regardless, he shut off the lights. Although nothing happened, and Bill proved that the Hatman had no authority over him, Devin's personality only grew more aggressive. Eventually, neither Bill nor the police, who were often seen at his home, could resolve the issue, and their friendship came to a sudden and terrible conclusion. Bill believed that this Hatman was the general, the main source of evil around which all the other activity orbited, perhaps the main entity that had trapped the others and was calling the shots, so to speak. Bill began to learn from his experiences, accepting that he was in a war with an unseen foe that had tactics and strategy. They utilized scare tactics and fear to wear him down in a war of attrition, but he was quickly becoming a more worthy adversary against their assaults. Bill returned from a meeting and decided to lay down for a nap. He saw indentions like hands and feet in his mattress, so much that it became impossible to sleep. Then, a massive crash shook the entire house, as if something large had hit the side of his home. He shot up and inspected, looking for damage, but would find nothing. A second crash filled his house. He searched everywhere for any sign of destruction. His kitchen, his den, his office, but the same nothingness presented itself to him. He heard his car alarm go off, and he finally stopped in his tracks. He felt pure white-hot rage build up within him. He screamed, "I've had enough. You don't scare me anymore. I'm not the same person you picked on years ago. Show yourself and fight me. One of us is going to hell tonight, and it won't be me. This is God's house now. Leave this place." He heard another crash and ran towards it, continuing to yell that the entity show itself. Hell was unleashed inside of his home like a hurricane. Crashes and booms filled the air. Suddenly, the missing puzzle piece clicked. He knew that no amount of anger, desperation, or earthly knowledge would save him from this evil, so he called upon Christ to intercede. He screamed, "You were not invited. Under the authority of Christ, I demand you leave, or be bound by your worst fears until final judgment. He repeated these words at each new crashing sound. Eventually, 30 minutes of unrestrained malice ceased, and a new peace finally filled his home. My God, the courage and overall fearlessness of Bill in this moment is truly commendable. I mean, just imagine putting up with these horrible things day in and day out, and holding out for so long. Although terrifying, no doubt, to have gone through, I'm glad that there was some sort of confrontation between Bill and whatever this entity we know as the Hat Man, because I definitely feel like it needed to happen. The days afterwards, Bill felt a new sensation amidst the peace, like that of a chained-up rabid dog in the distance, just watching and waiting for a chance to break free and back into his life. While occasionally things would happen afterwards, Bill no longer felt like evil dwelled within his home or his life. However, the encounters left scars, both psychological and physical. Bill still struggled with looking over his shoulder and being comfortable sleeping at night. His health effects from the ordeal also never truly improved. Whether it was from the evil presence or simply the stress of the events, he would never be sure. Although in our conversations, thankfully, Bill said he did vanquish the cluster headaches, which he believes were a byproduct of the otherworldly interactions. In the years since, Bill has studied and become an expert in demonology in order to help others fight against an unseen foe in their own lives. He founded an association called the United Paranormal International. Bill's story has been featured on the show Paranormal Witness in 2013, and abridged versions of the events have been featured across the internet and YouTube. Again, in our conversations, Bill would tell me that he had to be talked into telling his story on the show Paranormal Witness by their producers. He's truly a man that values his privacy, I can tell you that for sure, but that he became convinced that his telling of his experiences would ultimately, and hopefully, have a positive impact on people who could be experiencing something similar. Bill has given multiple interviews on various podcasts, but decided to set the record straight in his 2022 book, Satanic Warfare: Tactics of the Demonic. In it, he gives his own account, as well as the eyewitnesses in his life of the events that transpired. He also includes extensive entries over just what he learned concerning the demonic forces that stalked him, but he cautions anyone attempting to utilize his methods. They are the collections of his experiences, personal beliefs, and convictions, and cannot be considered scientific. They are also not guaranteed any degree to be successful. He says that spiritual warfare is a form of psychological warfare, utilizing fear tactics to wear a target down over time so that we give up spiritually and obey evil's power. It is based on negative emotions such as fear, stress, anger, and social disunity. As a victim grows weaker, the demons begin to appear stronger. The first line of defense is to have no fear against demons. He states that as fallen angels, demons still have rules that they must follow. They only enter our lives to the degree which we explicitly or implicitly allow. They are not all powerful, for if they were, they would not be forced to resort to scare tactics and trickery to wear down their opponent. However, they have the experience of the entirety of human history on their side when they wage war upon human souls. Once you acknowledge that there is in fact a demonic presence, the only recourse you have is that you must call upon the name of Christ. Bill has since retired and moved out of the house within which he suffered for so many years. He now lives with his wife Carolyn Vaile and his stepson Ryan in Arkansas. In Bill's story, we have seen how curiosity can be used as a doorway that can lead to knowledge and understanding. However, curiosity can be used as another kind of doorway, one that once opened can unleash an abhorrent darkness into our lives, one that is not always so easily cast out. I would not only like to thank Bill for being amazing and providing the clarifying details, the evidence, and overall just for being so down to earth and patient with me to make this video happen. In all honesty, I find him to be a truly genuine person, and in my opinion, it only adds to the credibility of his story. If you liked this video, please give it a like, share it with the world so we can spread Bill's true story and clear up any misinformation that could still be believed. And subscribe if you're new here with notifications. Bill did also want to add a personal statement. He says, "Cody, I so appreciate your hard work in bringing the facts to light. It has been a long, hard slog to correct many of the inaccuracies being told online. My goal is, and has, and shall remain, to get to the truth. Your efforts and hard work will, I hope, accomplish this, as I know you're a sincere individual who wants nothing more out of this story but to help people and to give them hope that there can be a positive outcome, to remind people that this is a spiritual war and must be fought as such. Thank you again, my friend. You did a great job." As mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you'd like to win a signed copy of Bill's book, Satanic Warfare, Tactics of the Demonic, Lessons Learned, signed by not only Bill Vaile himself, but also the other co-authors, Monica Koldyke Miller and Carolyn E. Vaile, then like this video and watch this video along with 9 other Mystery Archives videos for 10 in total, and email a screenshot of the proof, so to speak, to mysteryarchives@gmail.com, and I will do the drawing 2 weeks from the release of this video to the day. Bill's books are available on Amazon, and I highly recommend picking up some copies today, as well as my book, Stories from the Archives, Volume 1. And please leave us both 5-star reviews. This helps us out so much on Amazon. Lastly, from Bill, anybody who wants a signed copy of the book can mail it to Bill with a $5 add-on charge for Bill and Carolyn's signature and a $10 add-on charge for Monica's. This is to cover shipping. Then I have to mail it to her after we sign it, and she has to mail it to whoever purchased it. I did also want to add that my cousin Brett, also known as Phobicon, helped me with the original script for this video and will be posting his own content very soon. You may also remember him from the Willow Street haunting video that I put out. I recommend you subscribe and follow him for spooky stuff that he's got coming very soon. Other than that, guys, thank you for being the best community that a guy could ask for. I love you all, and thank you for allowing me to do what I do. This has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Remember to please stay safe out there, and take care. I'll see you next time.